Warning: contains adult content including harsh language, violence, and sexual themes, and may not be suitable for people under age 17.
He knelt over the parents calmly and stared into their faces. They couldn't scream, so they just moaned and whimpered. "To my dear mother, He shot the knife into the woman's lower belly and ripped it straight across, exposing her intestines. She gasped, twitching, her life fading fast. "Made her regret ever giving birth to me and my sister." He started pulling the intestines out of her belly and dug until he finally found the uterus, cutting it out with the knife. He threw it to the floor and stomped on it. Tears streaming out of her eyes, the woman eventually stopped moving completely. The father was watching, holding his throat in terror. He too was fading quickly. "To my father?" Kodo plunged the knife into both of the man's eye sockets and then, without warning, stabbed every inch of his body he could reach. I made sure he regretted everything he had ever done in his entire life. Riku was horrified. "And you got away with it?" he whispered. Kodo nodded impressively. "Oh yes," he said. "But there was one family member left. My younger sister. Poor thing. I really felt sorry for her, but that didn't change the fact that she was evil. My parents made her who she was. She was corrupted, suffering, and overall nasty to everyone. Lashed out, you know." "What did you do to her?" Riku asked, now sounding more frightened than before. "Cut her head off," Kodo said nonchalantly. "It's really too bad you don't have a sister to replicate the massacre of my family. I guess you will have to suffice." Riku staggered backward. I thought you were going to let me live!" he gasped, falling backward onto the floor. "Oh dear," laughed Kodo. "At what point did I ever say that?" I can take the blame," Riku shouted. "I'll say I killed my parents." "Yeah, that just won't cut it." Kodo pinned Riku's shoulders with his knees and began sawing at his neck with his knife. In a few minutes of screaming and spluttering, Riku's head parted with his body. Kodo sighed, listening hard for sirens, but there were none. He figured he had some time to fool around. He was very careful not to touch anything with his fingers unless he was planning to take it with him. He also tried very hard to keep his clothing from getting any blood on it. There were only a few splatters, but it was good that his clothes were black. He'd wash the stains out with cold water later. With his knife, Kodo carved a bloody message into the living room wall. Then he went to the sink, turned it on with a cloth, and washed his hands. He also washed the bottoms of his shoes, for they had blood on them. Suddenly there was a faint mew from below. He looked to the floor and saw a beautiful orange tabby cat staring at him with huge green eyes. He smiled. "Hi there," he whispered, almost like a purr. He contemplated, then gently lifted the feline and walked out the back of the house, careful to stay in the bushes until he was clear enough from the house that he could walk calmly back to Mina's apartment. He stroked the cat's head and looked in its eyes. "I'm sorry to take you away," Kodo muttered to it, "but you remind me of a kitten I once nurtured, and I don't want to risk them sending you to the pound. You'll be safe and happy with me, and Mina will just adore you." The cat didn't seem to mind being carried away. It stayed completely still, purring slightly as Kodo took a less crowded street to the apartment. He smiled as he heard sirens in the distance. "Oh, Kodo!" squeaked Mina when she came home from work. "He is just precious!" She spotted the cat sleeping on the throw, but now woke up at the sound of Mina's squeals. "I rescued him," Kodo said truthfully. "Went for a walk and found him laying under a bridge." He knew the bridge was far from the house he was in. "I want you to name him." Mina blushed and sat down next to the cat, who stared at her. She furrowed her brow, staring right back. "Haku," she said finally. Kodo blinked. "Spring?" he said. Mina nodded. "It was the name of my old cat, who we adopted as a kitten in the springtime when I was 8, Mina explained. Kodo smiled, looking at Haku, who yawned and laid his head on his paws. "That's a perfect name," he said quietly. Mina flinched. "There's a tiny bit of blood on his ear," she said, and Kodo frowned. Do you think he got hurt?" "You know strays," was all he could say. Mina turned on the television. "I wonder if they have anything new on him," she said, sadness in her voice. "They won't," said the voice in Koto's head, sounding amused. He idly stroked Haku's fur, not paying attention to the voice from the anchor, until she said, "An arrest was made today on suspicion of being the notorious murderer the police have been chasing for 3 years." Koto looked up so fast he winced in pain as he felt a twinge in his neck. Mina leaned closer, looking delighted. The anchor continued on. "Ichiro Takahashi's fingerprints and strands of hair were found in the home of a family, the Yamuras, who were found dead in their living room this afternoon," she said. "The massacre of a man and a woman, as well as their son, resembled the murder of the Sakura massacre 3 years ago to the exact detail." There was the chief of police being questioned again. "Takahashi was shouting that he didn't do it, claiming that the son, Riku, was his best friend. Takahashi has had a record of drug abuse as well as the son. Questioning students from their school, the 2 boys were never found alone. Takahashi said that he had been over at the Yamura house and admitted to smoking pot with the son. He said the father had caught them and sent Takahashi home. I left the house around 12:30 and went to my girlfriend's house right after," said Ichiro Takahashi on the television. "I walked away and heard Riku's parents shouting at him." "I don't know who he's fooling," said Mina excitedly. "However," said the female anchor, and Mina's smile faded, "the police later contacted the parents of the girlfriend Takahashi went to see, and they confirmed that he had been there from 12:45 to 2 o'clock, when he was tracked down and arrested. The murder in question was discovered at 1:30 this afternoon. To be safe, they subjected him to a lie detector test, questioned classmates and relatives, and searched his clothing for blood before releasing him." Mina gaped. "It wasn't him," she whispered. The anchor continued. "The chief of the police force says that the detail of how the family was killed are too brutal to be described on television. However, they did provide information of a message carved into the wall of the Yamura's living room. You people are complete idiots. You fuckers are never going to track me down." The word fuckers had been censored. "It's obvious that the maniac responsible is finding this terrible act very funny. The police are doing all they can, but they said they can't even find a single fingerprint on the bodies of the victims. Are they really doing all they can? The public doesn't think so." The scene switched to an older woman. "I don't feel protected by our legal system anymore," she said angrily. "The police aren't trying hard enough." There were a few more citizens interviewed, all expressing how much they hated the Japanese police force at the moment. Finally, the anchor concluded with information that the possibility of FBI agents being used to try and solve the case. "What do the Americans have that we don't?" exclaimed Mina. "Their police can't be more advanced than ours, can they?" "Well, their police and the FBI are different," said Koto. He was a little worried if the FBI got involved. "The FBI has jurisdiction to investigate over 200 types of federal crimes, and they're more advanced and qualified than any police force." Mina sighed. "I hate to admit it," she said quietly, "but I agree with the message the guy carved into the wall." Koto stared at her. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Isn't it strange, though, how he replicated the first murder he ever committed? I wonder what he did." Koto decided to throw something out, smiling. "What makes you so sure that the murderer is a man?" he said jokingly. Mina frowned. "I dunno," she admitted. "It just seems like something a man would do." "There have been female killers," Koto reasoned. "Women can get pretty psychotic sometimes. And they are more clever than most men, and that's been proven." He was testing her. "Not all women are crazy, and not all men are stupid," Mina exclaimed. Koto smiled. She passed, he thought. "That's pretty smart thinking," he said softly, and Mina blushed again. "You don't follow most stereotypes, I take it." "No," she said. "There are people who make their stereotypes true, but that doesn't mean it applies to everyone in that particular group." Her eyes fell to the floor. "But I have a feeling," she murmured, "a very strong feeling that the murderer is a man." "What makes you say that?" asked Kodo quietly. "The message on the wall," she said, looking at him and smiling. "He's cocky." Kodo laughed, a genuine, mirthful laugh. It was the first time he had actually laughed without evil intentions. "It feels good," said the voice. Mina giggled. "My," she laughed, "I've never heard you so happy. You have such an attractive laugh. I want to hear it more often." Kodo felt his face grow hot, and he looked down, and suddenly realized that his eyes had rested unintentionally on Mina's breast. His eyes lingered. "Those are nice," he thought. "I wonder how soft they are." He shook his head. It was wrong of him to think like that. He had to admit, however, he thought Mina was very beautiful. Mina hadn't noticed where his eyes were momentarily staring, for she had glanced at the clock. "I'm going to take a shower, and then I will cook dinner, okay?" "Sure," said Kodo, his mouth feeling dry. She stood and went to her bedroom to grab a change of clothes, and then went into the bathroom. Kodo heard the water turn on. "Why are you thinking like this?" he asked himself. "Sure, she's attractive, but you've got to kill her. Stop getting so excited. It's not like she let you touch her or anything, and you are not going to force yourself on her. You know this." Kodo was staring at the bathroom door, which was ajar. "Don't even think about it," said the voice in his head. "You'll get into trouble. Just go to the kitchen sink and splash cold water on your face, and you'll be fine." Kodo inched towards the door. "Do I really have to kill her?" he thought desperately. "She's been so kind to me, and she named the cat. She took care of me when I got sick, and she's been feeding me." His thoughts grew angry. "Stop getting attracted! You are starting to trust her. No one is trustworthy. Everyone is scum! Besides, she will eventually find out who you are." Kodo sighed and thought, "No, she won't, because I have to kill her." He was at the door now, and slowly opened it a fraction of an inch, trying to see Mina. The shower curtain was clear, but nonetheless, he could only see a fuzzy outline of her body. What a wonderful fuzzy outline it was. Haku meowed very loudly behind Kodo, making him jump. He turned to stare at the cat and put his finger to his lips angrily. He meowed again. Kodo didn't hear the water shut off. He turned back to the door and... wham! Kodo fell backward, clutching his nose and seeing stars. He felt blood oozing from his nostrils. Once his vision cleared, he looked up to see Mina, who appeared quite astonished, holding a pink towel around her. Kodo couldn't think of anything to say to get out of the situation. "Well, when I realized I forgot to grab a bra, I didn't expect to see you trying to peep at me," she said, and to Kodo's amazement, she sounded highly amused. Kodo withdrew his hand from his nose. It was covered in blood. Mina giggled and wet a washcloth in the kitchen sink, kneeling down to tend to Kodo's bloody nose. "Serves you right." Kodo desperately searched for the right words. "I'm a man! I couldn't help myself!" These were not the right words. Mina finished dabbing the blood and tossed the cloth onto the floor. She crossed her arms, giving herself even more cleavage than she already had, which didn't help Kodo at all. "I hope you understand how violated I feel," she said, no amusement in her voice now. "I've only known you for 2 days. This is not a good impression of you." "I know," said Kodo, angry with himself. "I'm a fucking loser. I lost my virginity at 15, and 3 years of having sex and then 3 years of no female, let alone human contact." Mina blinked. "You had a girlfriend?" she asked, trying to sound as uninterested as possible. 4, actually, said Kodo. The first one cheated on me, which really sucked because she was the one I lost my virginity to. The second one died in a car crash, drunk driver. The third one was a total leech, and the fourth one... He broke off. He had killed his 4th girlfriend and her family shortly after he killed his own family. He decided to tell part of the truth.